There's a lot of commonality between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. They all are surrounded by a plasma membrane. They are all full of cytosol, which is a fluid substance that fills up the cell, and when organelles are suspended in it, we call it cytoplasm. They all contain chromosomes, which have genes. They all have ribosomes to make their proteins. There are also some major differences between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotes evolved first, so they're much simpler, with no nucleus, no membrane-bound organelles, and a smaller size. Eukaryotes evolved later, so they're more complex. They have a true nucleus, they have membrane-bound organelles, and they are larger. Another difference is their DNA. Most prokaryotes have circular DNA, and they only have one, whereas eukaryotes are linear and tend to have more than one. Now, there are some exceptions to this, as eukaryotes did evolve from prokaryotes, but that is typically a good distinction between them. If we look at the Linnaean hierarchy of life, we can see that there's domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Or the way I always remembered it, dumb kids playing catch on freeway go splat. However, prokaryotes are separate from eukaryotes in this hierarchy. They form the domains bacteria and archaea, and domain bacteria has one kingdom, eubacteria, whereas archaea also has one kingdom, archaea bacteria. Unlike prokaryotes, eukaryotes have four kingdoms and only one domain. Protists is the first of those kingdoms, and it's where the other three evolved from. So they don't really fit into any other category. There are plant-like protists, animal-like protists, and fungi-like protists. Some are unicellular, some are multicellular, some are microscopic, some are 100 meters long, some are heterotroph, some are autotroph. Really, they have two things in common. They are eukaryotic and they live in moist environments. Fungi have cell walls like prokaryotes and plants, but theirs is made of chitin and they can have more than one nucleus. The major differences that we're concerned about right now, though, are the differences between plant and animal cells. Plant cells have three things that animal cells do not, whereas animal cells only have one. So plants have a cell wall made of cellulose, unlike chitin in fungi. They have plastids, like the chloroplast, and they have vacuoles, which are for storage. Animal cells only have one that the plants don't have, and that's the centrosome, which is used in cell division. It is important to note that not all cells are the same. Some animal cells will have organelles that others won't. Some will be missing some, and the same in plants. An example is the red blood cell in animals. It has no nucleus, and yet it is eukaryotic. It doesn't have a nucleus because it needs to increase the oxygen binding capability. So sometimes specialization will result in cells that are different from normal. The cell wall is a layer that surrounds the cell and functions for structural support and protection. It acts as a pressure vessel, preventing overexpansion when water enters the cell, and it can be found in plants, fungi, and prokaryotes. But the structure is not the same because it evolved separately. Plant cell walls are made of the polysaccharide cellulose, which we know as fiber. Fungal cells contain a cell wall that's not made of cellulose, but instead use chitin. In the prokaryotes, bacteria use a compound called peptidoglycan, which is a combination of protein and sugar. In archaea, there are dozens of molecules they use. Some of them use something like peptidoglycan, but it varies. So you can use what makes the cell wall up, to determine what type of cell you're looking at. The cell membrane surrounds the cell and is made of phospholipids. It allows for a selective passage of materials like oxygen and nutrients coming in and wastes and cellular products going out. To do their job effectively, each organelle has to maintain an internal environment distinct from the cytosol. So each organelle is also bound by a membrane. And this is really good for us because organelles are able to compartmentalize, which means they are able to do special jobs. The chloroplasts and the mitochondria on the left both function for energy, and without that compartmentalization, that would be impossible. Looking at cells, they only get so big, you can see on the right, but why? Turns out the major limitation here is what's called the square cube law. As cells get larger, volume increases cubically, but surface area only increases by the square. Cells need surface area for diffusion of nutrients and waste. Instead of getting larger and larger, the way to fix this is to divide. So if you look at the example on the right, one block of 5 by 5 only had a surface volume ratio of 1.2. But if you divide that block into 5 by 5 blocks for the whole area, you end up with a surface area to volume ratio of 6, which is a lot more feasible for a cell. Viruses are extraordinary and they cause a lot of diseases, and we use them for research, but they are not cells. So a virus is a non-living particle made up of a nucleic acid and either a protein or lipid coats. They're very, very small, smaller than prokaryotic cells. They don't have cytoplasm, they don't have organelles, they can't carry out functions like metabolism, they can't grow by dividing. And actually, to reproduce, they have to hijack the host cellular machinery like ribosomes and enzymes and ATP to reproduce. And so we need to remember that viruses are not cells and they are not alive.